Okay, hear me out, hear me out. I understand. This is one of the strongest teams we have ever gotten. This straight up the strongest team we've ever gotten by a fucking country light year. But I do have some issues with this team, alright? This team is not perfect. They do a shit ton of damage, but this team is not perfect, so we're gonna talk about it. First, I want to start with Elmesia and Gazel. So Elmesia has a little thing that I really hated about Masayuki. She doesn't actually increase your skill point gain on greens. She needs Gazel to do that for her, which is really fucking stupid because that basically staples Gazel to any team that you want to run with Elmesia as the protector. Which wouldn't be a problem if Gazel was good, but that man has a 90-point skill that I'm pretty sure is weaker than a lot of 55-point skills. Like 70% attribute resistance down and then like weakness resistance down for 90 points? That sucks. Like genuinely it does. Those percentages sound high. They are very versatile, but I'm pretty sure Violet's 100% magic attack will just let you do more damage. And she was one of the featured units for the 2nd anniversary. Also, speaking of Violet, her orb change is just better. Now, I understand the idea that Gazel has a really cheap orb change that you can use multiple times because of Diablo. But if you don't have Diablo, his orb change is completely useless. And on top of that, I'm pretty sure, I could be wrong, I'm not actually looking at the kit right now, but I'm pretty sure he only changes orbs for the category he's on, so the units on this team. That's really bad. Not only is he super restricted to one team for orb changing, but then he only changes one orb. And yeah, you can get a stupid amount of skill points each turn about halfway through the fight if you use Gazel properly, because realistically, his ability to infinitely stack his, I think, 30% skill point increase on greens will allow you to use, all of your other skills, primarily Raphael's synergy power and something, I forgot what it was, ult damage, that's what it was, a lot more than you would if, Gazel wasn't infinitely stacking, kind of like how Geld was for Masayuki. Geld was capped at 500. You could go beyond 500 if you really wanted to for Gazel, but that's like entirely unnecessary because if you're smart and you are actually paying attention to what the fuck you're doing, which I will say I really like about this team. I actually really like that this team forces you to fucking pay attention to what you're doing. One of my biggest issues with blue stacking teams, other than the fact that we get way too many of them, is that most of them are pretty much exactly the same as each other. And you can pretty much just turn your brain off and just repeat the same sequence of events over and over and over again till turn 8. But with this team, if you truly want to maximize the amount of damage you do, if you truly want to use this team in its most optimal setting, you actually do have to consider a lot of different factors. It's the polar opposite of the Vengeance team. Instead of just turning your brain off and essentially letting the game beat itself, you actually have to participate. I really like that about this team, but it doesn't change the fact that a green stacking protector not increasing skill points on green orbs is just bad design. Like, it's not even an inconvenient thing. It is just straight up bad character design. And I would really like to put someone else on the team other than fucking Gazel, who's only changing one goddamn orb every time. Sure, I have enough skill points to do it, but fuck you. But I can't because he has to be there. If he's not there, Elmesia, if he's not there, you're only getting like 102, 103 skill points per turn. I actually wanted to try Elmesia as the protector for the Overlord team. I was going to put Diablo on the team as well. Diablo and Momiji, to get synergy rate, synergy power, and synergy resistance. I got to turn 8, and then I realized I only have like 205 points because nobody's raising the fucking skill point increase. I've got a cap of fucking 450 or 500 by this point, but the actual amount of skill points I have is less than half of that. It actually makes Elmesia a very limited protector. Because if you just don't want to use Gazel, which is very understandable, his buff looks impressive but is terrible, and his orb change is also terrible, you can't. You literally just can't use Elmesia without Gazel there. It is bad design. It makes Elmesia half the protector she should be, given all of the other things she actually is doing. I just don't understand why they're going in the direction of just not giving these green stacking protectors actual ways of increasing the skill points on greens. It's so stupid. You're still giving it to the fucking blue stacking protectors. I mean, I say that. Technically, we have gotten 2 green stacking protectors since the last blue stacking protector. So, you know what? Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the next blue stacking protector comes out next month, which will most likely be a collab. Either November or December, we're getting a collab. Alright? Like, that is unavoidable. We are getting a collab before the 2-year anniversary officially ends. But if either one of the next 2 teams is a blue stacking team, for all I know, they could do the same bullshit. And if they do, I'm gonna make another video exactly like this, talking about how that is bullshit. It is bad character design. Also, I just want to briefly touch on Diablo. I'm not a fan of the way they're handling these support type EX Unbound unit, attribute Unbound units. I don't think the buff that their ults give is sufficient enough to warrant the huge drop off in damage. Because Diablo does not function as an AoE nuker. He can't. Because the nerf to his fucking ult damage compared to other AoE units is supreme. Diablo does not function as an AoE nuker. Not properly. Of course, the team itself can still make Diablo strong enough to kill all of the current existing content in the game, but, like, as we move forward, Diablo's not gonna fucking kill anything. Because his damage is so low. Which wouldn't actually be a problem if his ult was giving some type of substantial buff, but it's just a weakness strike buff that's not really that high. If his fucking ult was giving like 400% weakness strike every single time you used it, then fine, but I think it's like 60? Like 60 or 80, some shit like that. That's simply not, weakness strike is not that strong of a buff. In fact, it's one of the weaker buffs. Genuinely, I'm not a fan of how they're handling the support type EX attribute Unbound units, and I fucking hate not giving stacking protectors a way to increase skill points on orbs. We need skill points. You cannot properly nuke without skill points. You can't do shit without skill points. I will say, before anyone thinks I think Diablo is just bad because he can't kill anything, no, Diablo is fantastic. Diablo fits on so many teams, even fucking blue teams, because while you're not going to take advantage of the increased gauges, if you put him on a blue stacking team, you can still use his synergy rate, his synergy power, and his ability to allow you to use skills multiple times. Diablo is a fantastic unit. What I said is not something that specifically pertains to Diablo, but we've now gotten 2 EX Unbound characters that have basically the same type of ult buff, and they both really suck. So I just want to preface that and say that I don't have a problem with Diablo specifically. It's just the way that they're handling the support abilities for these ults. Either increase the buff or just let them still do like regular damage. AoE nukers already have lower percentages because they're AoE. Just let him do normal damage or give him a fucking buff that matters. I don't know. Let me know what you guys think. I think Raphael is more or less perfect. I would have rathered her just give a more generic 120% buff rather than space and dark attack. But that's just me nitpicking at this point. Like, 120% space and dark attack is a good buff, but it's not the best buff, and it's super restrictive. To be fair, space and dark, I believe, are the first and third most commonly released units. I believe the top three would be light at number 1, space at number 2, and then dark at number 3. So you're not exactly limited in who she can support with that buff, but there are still units in the game that do not benefit from that. I think it would have just been better if it was just a 120% all attribute attack buff. Like, that would have just made more sense. It also would have warranted a 90 skill point cost rather than like an 80. I know that those 10 skill points don't seem like that big a deal, but they very much can make a difference between putting another buff on your team and not putting another buff on your team. So Raphael is fine. If I were to nitpick, then I would have rather her just have a more generic buff, but she's fine, honestly. She's a DPS unit. It's fine. Is she the actual DPS unit for the team, or is the next banner or the banner after that going to have the proper DPS? Because if there's actually another proper DPS that comes out, then I have a much bigger problem with that skill. But if Raphael is meant to be the primary single target nuker, then it's fine. Single target nukers tend to have more selfish buffs anyway. Alright, I'm going to get out of here. I think I got across what I needed to get across. Let me know if you disagree with me, and I will see y'all later. Peace.